Okay, so what I'm going to show in this program is how to connect MMMAudio and Open Sound Control, so something like TouchOSC, and send messages via TouchOSC and get them controlling your audio. So I'm starting with a very simple frequency modulation circuit. So all I've got a carrier, I've got a modulator, I've got a messenger, and we're going to use that in a second. And then I have the frequency of the modulator, the frequency of the carrier, and the modulation multiplier. So those are my variables that I need. So in the init function, we initialize those things. The carrier, we're using sync interpolation and some oversampling. That's probably overkill for this situation. And then we're just using a modulator. So it's two sine waves, modulation, modulator, modulating the carrier. And right now the frequency of the modulator is 440, frequency of the carrier, let's make it 660. And the modulation multiplier could be whatever, 3000. Okay, so if we run that, we get some basic frequency modulation. But what we want to do is use TouchOSC to control this circuit. So in MMMAudio, we basically have a convenience class called OSCServer that is going to, be our OSCServer and get open sound control messages. All this really does is provide a wrapper around existing Python open sound control stuff and allows it to be multi-threaded. You can do this stuff without it, but you'll have to deal with the threading yourself. So great. So what we have is we have an OSCServer. It has three arguments here, right? And it has 0000, and that is the IP address that it's going to get messages from. And what this means is it'll get messages from anywhere. It's not picky. You can give a specific address, but you don't have to. Then you have the port, and you do have to give this. So this is a unique port, and basically the open sound control program is going to send to that port. Once Python grabs that port, no other program can grab that port. So it's a unique port ID. You can't have SuperCollider grabbing from that port as well, or Max or something. And then it has a function, and the function is what happens every time a new message is received. So in order to use this, we have to have a function. Here's our function. I'm going to delete this for now, make it really simple. So here's our function. What it does is it receives the key and the arguments, and then it's going to print the key and it's going to print the arguments. So this is just Python. We start the server and it says OSCServer listening. So I'm going to go over to TouchOSC and I'm going to make a slider, a fader. And if you look in TouchOSC, the fader over here will tell you the name is fader 1, and under open sound control it says it's sending fader 1 as the key because it's sending an address that is /name, and name is fader 1. So in TouchOSC, I just need to check in here on where we're sending the messages to. So you want it set on UDP, and although I haven't tried TCP yet, it might work. It's going to send to the host being the local machine. So 127.0.0.1 means it's going to send to the local machine. If you're running this on your iPad or something, you need to put an address in there. Something I really like is that you can use, like on a Mac, you can use MAC address. So you can do like sam.local, and that'll work. But we're just going to say the local machine. It's going to send to 6001. I have two setups set up because I use this for SuperCollider as well. So I'm sending to this port the messages, and I'm also going to send to this port. So the one we're listening to is 5005. So that's on the local machine, and receive is 5006. So if we're sending messages back to TouchOSC, we send on this port, but we're sending to Python, we're using this port. Okay, so I have this set up to do 2. You don't have to have, you can just have one of them. Okay, so if I press play and I move the slider, it says receive OS message fader 1 with argument blah, 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 right? If we add an XY, which we're going to use as well, and that's going to be XY1, and we run that. So notice the XY actually sends 2 arguments. So it's important to know what sends 1 argument, what sends 2, what sends more than that, because then you can parse the data correctly. So actually, we're gonna keep these, and we're gonna use them. MMMAudio. Great. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this dictionary right here, OSChandlers, and OSChandlers is going to contain a dictionary of functions that we want to be able to run when we receive certain keys. So if you look here, OSChandlers equals, and the syntax is squiggly bracket, right? And then we can have, on each line, we can have a different key. So first one is /fader1, and that's the one that we're getting for the fader that we're moving. And this one's /fader2, that's fader 2. We haven't made fader 2, but if it were to receive fader 2, it would do this function. So when it receives fader 1, it's going to run this lambda function, which is just going to print fader 1 and the args. So basically it's going to be printed twice because the function receives the key and the arguments, then it prints it, and then I just commented that out. And the next thing it will do is it will call OSChandlers with the key and the arguments. So the OSChandlers will receive the key and it says, okay, that's the key, do this with this arguments. Okay, that's the key, do this with this arguments. So let's see what that looks like. Right, so you see when I receive a fader 1, it prints it twice because it gets the key and the arguments here, and it prints it, and then it says if that key is in OSChandlers, which it is, then run the function at that key with these arguments. If I move the XY, it only prints this because it prints this. It looks for the key. It looks for XY1 here, doesn't see it, and it doesn't work. So let's add that function. Right, and so now it's going to be calling this. Since we're getting XY, and just know that you can execute multiple lines of code. Notice that all of these are single line functions. So if we want to print maybe X and then Y on separate lines, I'm going to say when I receive XY1, lambda args : and then we'll do an open parentheses, and we'll have print, let's call X args at 0, print Y args at 1. In this case, when it gets an XY, it's going to get the arguments and then run this function, which is going to run multiple lines of code, print to prints. So let's check that out. Yeah, and you'll see that that prints on 2 different lines of code, or 2 different lines. Now we want to use these values in our program, and we're going to have to use, we're going to use the messenger in the Mojo code. So if we go over here, we have this messenger called M, and it is defined here. So we want to add a messenger that will receive the value of the frequency of the carrier and the frequency of the modulator, and modmul, right? So I'm going to say self.m.update self.freak mod, and we'll send the message freak mod, so frequency of the modulator. And then we're going to also do that with the frequency of the carrier. And we're also going to do that with the modmul. So what's going to happen is anytime we send a message, freak mod, it will update this value. If we send a message, freak carrier, frequency of the carrier, it'll update this value. When we send a modmul number, it'll update this value. So let us, that should work. So over here, we have this XY and this fader. So with the fader, instead of printing the fader, what I'm going to do is I'm going to MMMAudio.send float. What was it? Modmul. So we're going to send a float, and we need the key and we need the value. So the XY, or the fader, is giving us values between 0 and 1. We actually want them to probably be between like 200 and 5,000. So I'm going to take that value and scale it. So lin args at 0, because it's the first argument in args, first value in args. And the slider goes from 0 to 1, and we're going to go from 20 to 4,000. And then I'm going to use this XY. So I'm going to send, whenever we get an XY message, I'm going to say, I'm going to take this, I'm just going to copy this line and change it to what I need it to be. So MMMAudio.sendFloat, and this is frequency of the carrier from 0 to 1 is what we receive. Now we're going to make this a linexp because we want the frequency range to is an exponential frequency range, whereas modmul is a linear range. So yeah, from 20, we can go from 2 actually, go from a low value, and that's what's the args at 0. So that is correct. But now we also want to send the frequency of the modulator, and not args at 0, but args at 1. So it's this, the XY gives us X and Y. And so args at 0 is X, args at 1 is Y. Okay. So if you notice, sounds great, but there's a certain kind of steppiness because there's no lag in there. So I'm going to keep it simple. I'm not going to use lists here, but I'm going to say var freak lag, and that's a lag, var mod lag var mod mul lag. And we need to initialize those. So the frequency is going to be self.freq lag.next of. I guess that could be frequency of the carrier. Okay, and so we need to use these values. So I don't want to use self.freqmod. I want to use freqmod. I don't want to use self.modmul. I want to use modmul. Okay. Now, an obvious thing that we should add just before we get out of here is a volume control. So I'm going to add a var vol. So this is something we probably want to default it to 0, right? And then okay, so we added the volume, we're updating the volume, and we're multiplying the volume. Maybe give it a little more headroom now that we have control. And over here, we already have the fader 2 set up. So all I need to do is add a function, which is going to send the float of the volume. What did I say? Vol or volume? Vol. And that's, we're not scaling that at all. We're just saying args 0 because it's between 0 and 1. And just over here, we're going to add another fader. And notice when you add a new one, it'll have fader 2. So it's already sending the message that we want. And it's good. It shouldn't be making sound because volume is set to 0. Okay, so you might want to add a lag for that volume if it feels a little clicky to you. But otherwise, this is a basic open sound control program working in MMMAudio.